Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for finding your way to our session today. And no matter what, you've come to the right session. That's all I'm going to say. And so I'm Russ Frankel. I'm a partner of Leslie Blicker regarding the symposium and this session in particular. And I think what we'd like to do, based on the number of folks that are in the session, is to just simply have you introduce yourself in chat. Your name, your role, and the organization you are with today. That would be great, so we can get a sense of who's in the space with us today, which would be great. Let me click my way out of this. I would also just ask the question of you, if you're brand new to the session and you did not attend the opening session where Leslie and I spoke, maybe what you could do, let me go into participants here and see all of you. I'm wondering if maybe what you could do is just either in chat or on your screen, just indicate with a thumbs up or something that you're brand new to us, and then we'll know how much we need to repeat from our opening session. Okay. I'm under the impression that most of you have been hanging out. I see one there. Okay. All right. So we want to speak a little bit about the genesis of our work and what brings us here. And I'm not going to overstate that, because I think what's really important for you to know is really these resources, right? That's why you came to this session. You came to see what have we put together for your use wherever you are in the state. And so what I will say is, my name is Russ Frankel again, and I'm a regional transitions coordinator for adult basic education. And in that role, what happens is transitions coordinators are positioned throughout the state of Minnesota in various regions. And we essentially work with Minnesota state partners, with the workforce system, and our ABE practitioners to really do this work as effectively as possible on behalf of either clients that are in the workforce system or adults who are in the education systems that we know of. And so I do that work in the Northwest region. I also do it in the Mid-Central region, which is around St. Cloud. And what I want to really talk with you about is the genesis and history of this project. And so numerous years ago, when the Developmental Education Strategic Roadmap was initiated through Minnesota State, which is a good 5+ years ago, there were folks in the Northwest region of the state who said, you know what, this is great. They're mentioning adult basic education in the work in that particular roadmap, which is wonderful news. And let's just go on the offensive and express our desire to be supportive of the items that are identified in that strategic roadmap and help Minnesota State to accomplish those ambitious goals. And so at that point in time, I was involved in finding Leslie Blicker. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself in a bit, but I'm just delighted that she came from the Minnesota State system. She understood it. And essentially, we began this effort of sort of inventorying what was going on in the Northwest and getting a kind of a pulse on what was happening there and not happening there. And it became crystal clear to us that we really needed to take a look at a broader view of this and, look across the state and start to look for, what's happening, what are some of the effective programs that are happening, and how might we share those, that kind of information to the benefit of practitioners statewide. And so that particular work, and I'm going to give Leslie credit for this, she thought about this notion of let's let's form an affinity group of practitioners in the Minnesota state system and in adult basic education. Let's just bring them together. And in this case, we come together essentially 12 times virtually over the course of 3 years. And we essentially share best practices. And we spend time talking about, what's working, what's not working, what are some of the obstacles and challenges, and really learning together and committing together to do this work on behalf of developmental education students. And what Leslie's going to share with you is essentially what's the outcome of affinity group involvement and us reaching out to a number of other practitioners to arrive at this sort of reservoir of resources that are now available for you to access and use. And so, Leslie, I'm going to kind of cut it short to that, because I think, you have the most critical information for these folks to dig into. And I want to give you a sufficient amount of time to be able to do that. So is there anything else, Leslie, that you think we should add to this, this overview?
No, Russ, I think you did a wonderful job, and thanks for teeing it up so well. And I'm now working on, I think, my second cup of coffee, and I got the extra large size. So I hope others will be free to, if you need to take a bio break or get your extra cup of coffee, we won't be offended. So let's carry on. Okay, so I did mention this in the opening session. I'm starting off with the 24 partnerships. And, we ask this question every single time we meet with people, even the affinity group. If you're involved in a partnership, whether you're ABE or at Minnesota State, we'd love to hear from you if you're not represented on these 2 slides. So I'm just leaving that. There's 2 slides, and I'll just show them for a minute or 2. But we did provide the link earlier in the opening session as to how to find these. And Marisa, I don't know if you can grab that link. Otherwise, I will post it as well in a little bit. I realized I did forget to introduce myself. So, and I'm going to go back to this slide again. Yeah, Russ did a good job. I'm Leslie Blicker. I was at the system office of Minnesota State for 18 years. I also taught at Metropolitan at Metropolitan State University for 22 years in their College of Management, and have enjoyed working in higher ed with all of the wonderful faculty, instructors, staff, administrators, and mostly students. So I'm still committed to this work, even though I retired from my full-time job 3 years ago. Apparently, I've done what they call my retirement has failed. I'm consulting part-time, but with a labor of love, Russ and I tend to work a fair amount anyway. So having said that, I do want to move into the resources. And by the way, feel free to post any questions along the way. I know all 3 of us, Russ, myself, and Marisa, will monitor them. I'm usually pretty good at spotting them as they come along, and I won't be offended if you have any questions to take them right during my presentation portion. We want to save enough time for a conversation later. But of those 24 partnerships, a lot of people ask what courses, and I know Rick mentioned this, I think in his opening session. He definitely talked about it in his follow-up session. Okay, question already. What DevEd students would not qualify as ABE students? I don't know that I'd word it that way. DevEd students are enrolled in one of the Minnesota State colleges, right? And then if that college has a partnership, they'd be working together, but ABE has input into their own students and who they work with separately from the colleges, even if they don't have a partnership. I think I'll save that for the end. Is it Kara or Kara? and maybe someone from ABE after we're done here. Otherwise, that might take a while to explain how ABE works. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to the resources. We're happy you're all here. You know, I would ask another question while we're talking about this, if you would put in the chat, what is it that drew you to this particular session? Where in particular do you feel like you might need some help or resources to view? If you don't have an answer, that's fine, but if you do, we'd love to hear from you. So the first resource, before I do that, yeah, Russ mentioned, how did the Affinity Group play into the development of all of these resources? And that's a great question, which is, when we started, you know, we presented, I think, and talked to people up in the northwest part of the state, since that was where the initial funding came from. And I can't remember how it happened, but I think we presented at a Minnesota State conference and also the Summer Institute for ABE. Russ, help me out again with the name of the group that puts on the Summer Institute.
Yeah, I mean, that's just typically a professional development committee that works in, I think, is Atlas involved in that?
Yeah, there's a
Marisa?
specific name though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
all right.
Literacy Action Network. Literacy Action Network. Yep.
There you go. Thanks, Marisa. In any case, between those two conferences, we found this vast hunger of people who wanted to come together. And that's when we formed the Affinity Group, as Russ mentioned. And it was in the fall of 2020, about 6 months after COVID hit. But a lot of folks were saying, I mean, we brought people together, and initially we had some of the existing partnerships share with each other their practices, their learnings, their takeaways, you know, how they started out initially, and what they tweaked over time, how trust was developed between the various partners and so on. And we found all these barriers, and we found all these best practices. And finally, I think somebody said, you know what, rather than just sharing it in a meeting, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a place where these practices could be sort of codified, if you will, like in a toolkit, or eventually maybe some tutorials and some videos. So thus began our development of the resources. And talk about a labor of love. I think it took us about a year to finalize the toolkit. But first of all, we do have a website, okay? And I'm going to take you to this right now. And if you haven't had a chance to look around, because we posted the link this morning. But thanks to Atlas, who is housing it for us. We have the website, and it's a good one for you to check from time to time as new things become available. But you can see our publications are here. And right now it's the toolkit, although we actually have something related to study guides as well. And I'll get into the toolkit in a minute. I just want to give you the overview. We have information about the Affinity Group and how to join that. Then just this summer, we developed opportunities for people new to partnerships to create their own study circle if they wanted to in their own locale. And that would be for ABE practitioners, for example, who have said, you know, we'd like to get a partnership going with the college in our area, but we either haven't contacted them yet, or we haven't reached anybody who has wanted to engage thus far. Or it could be college faculty or people here today who have heard great things and say, you know, I don't think we have a partnership. So it could be generated from either side. Okay. And so we've put together an opportunity with facilitation provided for you. We have some funds put aside to help get that launched. And then, of course, this is all about the symposium today. So I'm going to get back to the slides. Give me a minute here. So that's the main page, the valuable resource. Now, we want to talk about this toolkit and how to use it. It is, I don't know, the full PDF is probably around 40 pages, but We think it's excellent. We had 4 or 5 existing partnership teams prepare the content, help contribute content. I collated everything. Russ helped. We had a variety of groups edit and sort of look it over to look for accuracy as well as inclusion of those folks who were involved in it. And we've posted it on the website. There's a slightly shorter version on the website, all in text, and you can scroll through in pages. So you can go to the preface, the chapters, and so forth. And then there's a full PDF file as well. Sorry for all the scrolling. And it's right here. If you wanted to access the full PDF, and then you can print it out. It's probably, you know, apples to apples, it's maybe another 10 to 15% longer than what's here. But going back to the slides, here's what I'd like to share with you. I already mentioned we had 5 authoring teams and the groups who reviewed it. Now we licensed it under the Creative Commons license CC. It's by NC. It means anyone can remix and adapt it for non-commercial purposes as long as you provide attribution. So we're hoping that not only Minnesota folks will be using it, but we have received feedback that there's some national people who are accessing it as well. Feel free to take a look at it. If you don't have a partnership and want to get started, it's a good means for bringing people together, and you can work through the chapters of the toolkit together. Rick Kurtz mentioned, especially in his breakout session this morning, that they had many, I think they had, I don't know if anyone was in that, several, it was a stool with either 3 or 4 legs. And each of the legs more or less represented sort of a stage of how the partnership was formed and what they had to work through. So as a result of talking with people, the Affinity Group, and asking the teams to contribute, we put 5 chapters in the toolkit. And of course, the preface giving the background, how you would use the toolkit locally. And the first chapter, of course, is the whole introduction to the Ed ABE partner model, sort of an overview of how it works. One of the things that we heard frequently at the beginning, was how the instructors would work together with each other. So from the Minnesota State end of things, we did hear concerns, and some of you may want to post that in the chat, that if they were already teaching DevEd, they weren't sure how it would work to have someone else teach with them. Even there were some fears about loss of credits and some income. So what we've done in the toolkit is talk about, we sort of debunked the myths, if you will, and talked about how the investment up front and how the key to prior planning is essential. You have to have sort of top-down leadership as well as sort of bottom-up commitment to the process. And that for those partners who have worked together, they can talk about how they slowly started and built trust in each other. And they absolutely saw how they brought different roles into the classroom. And there are models of, you can see, models of what we call levels of collaboration. I'll talk about that in a second. But the toolkit has explanations and how-tos of all of this to help people feel more comfortable as they're working. I'm just grabbing the sheet about the levels of collaboration. Creating the partnership, the importance for, as we say, for administration, sort of championing this. On the levels of collaboration, this gets into the how-tos of partners, but we just want to give you an idea of what's in the toolkit so you can access it. If you search online for levels of co-instruction or teaching models, you'll find a number of different models, but the one in the toolkit that we arrived at were these 4 levels. The first level was where ABE comes and works together with the colleges, no integration with the college itself, there are standalone ABE courses. The second level of integration of ABE with the college is light integration, where ABE is embedded in the classroom support. The third level we call moderate integration, and this is in the toolkit. ABE is embedded in classroom support, but also provides study skills instruction. And then the top level we call high integration, and that is a true collaborative concurrent instruction, and it's the co-teaching model where both ABE instructor and faculty have figured out how to co-teach the course. What we learned by interviewing all of the teams that were in existence already is that most of them started with a very light level of integration, either no integration with the standalone courses or ABE embedded classroom support. However, ABE can provide that many more skills in the classroom, helping students, the navigation, the confidence that they need. And so over time, as the college faculty worked with the ABE instructor, we also learned that many of them had deepened their level of integration. So anyway, the fourth chapter is stories from the field. We sent out a series of questions, the same questions, to 4 of the successful Minnesota partnerships, and they produced some material back and we put them in. So if you really want to hear how the partnerships work, how did they get started, what kind of leadership support, what kind of funding was involved, what level of integration did they start out with, and how did they tweak it over time, that chapter is for you. And finally, we talk about the importance of documenting the partnership. The question that we've asked to everyone is, how do you know if the partnership is more successful than for DevEd students than without the partnership model? And mostly we're hearing qualitative feedback more than quantitative. The quantitative tends to be definitely increased pass rates. And the qualitative are, we know that our students are moving into their programs of study sooner. We follow the students, we know the students, and they report high levels of confidence that students feel ready to persist and to move on. And I see a comment here, probably a couple. Tell you what, I don't have that much more, so let me move through it and then we will, in spite of my earlier comment about fielding questions in between, let me kind of finish my train of thought here. So the stories from the field, that's what one of the first pages looks like. And these are the questions that we asked all 4 teams to write about. So I want to go back to the rest of the resources. I mentioned the DevEd Study Circle opportunity, and I'm going to go back to that webpage for a minute. If anyone here has any interest in forming one, please let us know, and we can talk to you offline and see. So here it is. There's a whole page on it. We've talked about study circles can be formed in a couple of ways: in your own region or community, or join a non-geographical study circle with other practitioners. We envision the study circles, if you have not yet been involved in a study or learning circle, they're usually a series of meetings where a group of people come together and they both learn and implement, and learn and implement. And what we're suggesting is that the team would work through the partnership toolkit together, and we've put together a study circle guide suggesting the agendas, if you will, for 2 or 3 meetings that the team would work together, maybe 4 meetings at the most. What we do know is that if you want to form a new partnership, it usually takes about at least 1 semester prior for the conversations and discussions to happen. And then the 2 instructors need some time together to work to plan if there's going to be curriculum redesign, or how they're, what level of integration they want to do and who's going to be doing what. So that's that. And then It must be in full screen. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Too many screens are open. Let me get back to my slides. Here we go. For some reason, it went back to that slide. I'm getting there. Okay. We also have on deck plans for future professional development offerings. We are planning one webinar this spring. So I think what we're going to do is after the evaluations from the symposium come back, we're going to take a look at what people enjoyed the most or wanted to hear more about, and we will probably plan one. We record everything, so it's available after the fact. And then we're looking at 3 more next year. And this is based on funding we received from Minnesota State in their innovation grant. We're also planning to put together some short videos. Of course, all of the videos from this conference will be made available, and we've got ideas for some newly created ones. And then we're working for faculty and student tutorials. If any of you are presently in an ABE and DevEd partnership and would like to provide a faculty tutorial or even have some students who you could bring together, we'd love to hear from you, and we do have some stipends available for that. So feel free to let us know or put it in the chat. In any case, if you sign up for the Affinity Group, you'll always get information about our offerings, but I'm imagining we may be able to use the registration list for this as well to send future information out. And finally, give me a second to, when you're presenting how the bar sits right over your slide, so you can't really see it. I can't see it actually. Give me a second. There we go. The DevEd Affinity Group, part 1. Okay. So Russ and I have been talking about it. We started a couple years ago, and the idea is to bring individuals interested in strengthening these collaborative teaching models together between, right, ABE and the colleges. Membership is totally voluntary, and we do have a website for it. Marisa, maybe you can put this link then into the chat and people can take a look at it. Once you join, you will be given permission to a OneNote site, which is just for the members, and that's where we post all of the agendas, recordings, and notes, rather than on the public site. And if you're interested, again, in joining, as soon as you let Russ and myself know, Russ will add you to the Affinity Group, and I will add you to that sort of internal website. So we hope you'll have some interest in that. There's one more meeting coming up this year of the Affinity Group, and even if you're new to it, we welcome all to the table. We provide 2 sessions to choose from for every meeting, just because we want to be able to accommodate schedules. And so the content is identical for both, other than what any of the attendees might bring up different discussion topics, but otherwise the presentation topics are the same. So these are your 2 choices. Session 1 is March 30th, and that's always usually in the afternoon. And then we have a second one followed up on a Friday morning. Thursday, Friday, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning. That's what we tend to go with. So that was a lot to kind of throw at you. I think what we'll do is we'll look at the chat maybe first and answer some of the questions. And then I have just 2 questions for you, and Russ will lead a conversation. So I think I'll take about the first 5 minutes, Russ, and then I'll turn it over to you. Okay. All right, let's go back and look at the comments. And I saw Latrice. Welcome, Latrice. It's nice to have a interim director from Minnesota State with us here today. Looking through all the introductions. Here we go. Okay. Okay, random question. Larry Stone. Go ahead. Someone was going to
Leslie and Russ, there was the question about the ABE tests, and Brad Haskamp, the ABE director, is in the session at the moment. If he would like to add any information, I did chat out links to both the CASAS and the TABE, but Brad could answer specific questions. Or Brad, I don't know if you want to come on really briefly and just talk about those ABE tests.
Thanks, Marisa. I'm happy to answer any questions about those tests, but with CASA's goals and TABE forms 11 and 12, those are the tests that we most frequently are using in our work in adult education. Those are tests that are approved by the federal government, and we are required to use in our adult education work. So that's just a little, and so folks are given a test before they start with our programming, and then once every typically 40 to 100 hours of instruction after that, according to federally approved assessment policy, also aligning with test publisher recommendations. But if anyone has any more specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Brad.
So Marisa, I see the one from Angela, and it says ABE students usually, oh no, I'm in the wrong one. That was the testing question. It's Larry Stone. Random question. Would an ABE partnership incur any additional cost to our college students? Would all students in the course be eligible for the extra help from ABE? And our answer is there's no additional cost to the students. Each campus would have to figure out if they want a partnership. Usually the costs involved are there's time for the team to come together, whoever comprises the team. It's usually the dean or administrator of DevEd. It's the instructors or faculty that they would select. Then ABE has costs, but they're reimbursed separately through their own process. But then there's some planning time between the two instructors. So we often say there's some amount of credit release time for a faculty member to be involved in the planning. And that's the investment up front, but nothing is passed on to the students in a partnership course that I'm aware of. It's up to the colleges to figure out how they want to pay for it or plan for it. Russ, did I? Okay, he's nodding.
That is accurate. Yep.
Okay. And then links. Where might they, where might they see samples of the tests? Brad, would you like to answer that?
Yep. So we cannot show you, we would be violating copyright law by showing you examples of the tests right now. So the best way to find examples of those assessments is to go to the websites which Marisa Giesler has put into the link to the CASA's website and the TABE website. And you can see sample questions on those websites. And I put also in the chat just after that, just acknowledging which test forms we're using, CASA's goals and TABE 11-12.
Thanks, Brad. I'm smiling because the next comment I see is Francois said, I know Leslie back to the day when Min Online was formed. Yes, it's great to see names. When I was looking at the registration list, there were many names I recognized from 15, 20 years ago. And I hope none of us have really aged that. I hope we've aged well. Let's put it that way. Good to see you here. Okay. I think that's it. That's all I've seen. Did I miss any questions, Marisa?
I'm not seeing any additional questions, and thanks so much for Brad for being here and helping us with the information on the TABE and CASAS tests.
Absolutely. So I have a couple quick questions. If you would put in the chat or raise your hand. Have any of you ever accessed these resources before today, and do you think you would?
Leslie, there is one additional question from,
Okay.
and I'm not going to try to pronounce your name because I don't want to mispronounce it. But go ahead, you are on camera, and go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jayant Anand. I'm the Dean for STEM and Health Professions at North Hennepin Community College. So for the last several...
So I'm so sorry about that. I was scrolling on the chat, but it went to the slides. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So my question really is pertinent. So I think we have a very good partnership with ABE at OSCEO, and we, for one of our courses, it's the it's our Math 801. It's the level below what financial aid will cover, right? And
Got it.
so, and that's where we find continued need for many of our students. And the challenge that we are finding ourselves in is not so much in terms of partnership with ABE, because I think ABE has been a wonderful partner. We have a fantastic ABE math instructor who team teaches these classes with our faculty members. So there's definitely emotional and vision overlap and convergence. So that's fantastic. Administratively, we are absolutely supportive of whatever we can do to be the college of the community. And if our community needs it, we need to be there for our community. Finances become a challenge for us, really, right? So the way the class is structured based on the partnership, it ends up to allow the time and space for the students. It ends up being essentially I should have checked the exact credit amount, but it's 3-4 credit contact hours worth of instruction, but we didn't want to pass on all of the cost to the students. So we only charge the students the equivalent of 1 credit. Right? But the instruction that is given to them is beyond that. Our initial planning, of course, was based on this idea that down the road, the students that we will be able to continue on will, I mean, it's an upfront investment on part of the college. The fact of the matter is that as enrollments decline and as placement measures have gone all over the map, many of those calculations are out of the window. And I was in the session earlier when Inver Hills was presenting their experience, and they too were talking about how do you sustain a model like this from a financial standpoint. So any suggestions, ideas, because we often get into these things. Thanks, Beth. My math colleague is here. It's 4 credits of instruction, but students pay 1 credit, and she's very actively involved in teaching that course. And we know we have great success with our students, but it's the financial model that is making it very hard in the current enrollment climate. And we can keep writing grants, but I'm not entirely sure if is that the only option, that we are in a perpetual grant writing cycle.
Yeah, if I might respond to your comments, you've certainly identified the challenge, right? And I would just say that in a little bit, we're going to hear about this new co-requisite model and the pathways, the math pathways, et cetera. And so my sense is that it's really going to require administrators like you, John, and others that are advocates of this to be able to help the system understand as clearly as it can that there needs to be some funding that is made available so that these planning efforts that go on the front side of a course, as well as some of the coordination and communication costs that happen during a course, that there's going to need to be some type of commitment that's made. You know, when you start taking a look at data around completion, and we're hoping that when people see this, that they see that the completion rates are stronger, which means that we're going to have more students that are getting to credit-bearing courses, and that we're going to be retaining that tuition from those students when we wouldn't otherwise. I think we can then begin to show value that it's important to invest on the front side in small ways and yet sustainable ways, Jehan, because if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, because that's the return on investment. You know, you put a little bit of money on the front side and you recognize that it's going to have to be there in order to make sure these students get the support they need and that the partnership is fed, right? There's nothing worse, as we well know, is to get a grant thing off the ground, get everything going, everyone's excited about it, and then it dies on the vine because you can't fund it. That's just an atrocity that we can't continue to have happen. And I think that's what, you know, true reform and design is about, is recognizing that you have to fund these things differently. So I hear you. I don't know if there's other reactions in the room, but that is clearly a challenge for us. But it's worth fighting for. I really believe for these students.
Well, there was,
Thank you, Russ. And I just wanted to add that comment about, I think I feel it's sort of when the conversations outside of education P20 is, I think the intent is always good, right? When people say we need to reduce the barriers and not have people go through developmental education, the fact of the matter is that we don't put our money where we need to.
Right.
As a society, right? So we keep kicking the can down the road and then expect colleges and universities, especially community colleges, right, to bridge the gap. And we want to do that. We have the human resource to do that. We simply do not have the money to support the human resource. And so to me, it's sort of whatever you and others on this call have any political influence, if you could, because I don't. I feel I don't have as much political influence.
Yeah. Well, and Jan, I would just say this, that in a minute, I hope you can hang around. We're going to have some of our P20 folks here. I think you'll hear what they're talking about. And then to the degree you're comfortable asking the question, I think you should. And if you don't, I certainly can, right? Because I'll be facilitating some of that conversation. So I thank you for your courage to bring it up, because it's a crucial conversation that needs to happen and the intention has to be there. There's clearly no doubt about it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Leslie,
Oh, you're muted, Leslie. Yep.
there was one more question, although I know Russ might want to ask a couple questions himself. I do want to hear how valuable the resources are. So if you would just type something in the chat, we can take care of that sort of asynchronously. But Larry had the question about, please help me talk to my dean. And Larry, are you a faculty member? I forgot how you went, or are you on the ABE side?
I think he's math faculty.
I think he's math faculty. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone here have great experience in talking to their deans? I mean, the other thing you could do is contact Rick Kurtz and say, okay, you're the dean who championed it when he was at South Central
How
College.
did you do it?
You know,
Yeah.
how should I approach my dean? I mean, he'd be a perfect example, or read the stories from the field. But yeah, I think it's fair enough to say you attended this today, and that you have some things you'd like to talk over. Russ, maybe I'll let you field this if you have anything else. Otherwise, I think talking to the people themselves who have done it already is your best bet.
Right. Yeah, I would concur with that. You heard from Inver Hills in the math session that, for instance, they went to Anoka Ramsey, took a closer look at what was going on there. And I think those are the examples of where we're going to hold up examples of folks that have been down this road a while and have done a lot of, in some cases, creative work, but at the other, they've become crystal clear that this is this is the sustainable approach to this work. And then find out from them, how is it, what are the steps that it took to get that in place and to make sure it stays in place. We can all be individual champions. We all know that. It's great to be an individual champion, but we need the institution to champion it if it's going to be sustainable, right? Because people come and people go. So that's what this is all about.
So we have 10 minutes left. Maybe Marisa would say that, but Russ, I'll let you take over from here, okay?
Yes.
And create some additional dialogue.
Yes,
Actually, just a few minutes left.
Yep.
We're ending
Great.
at 11:15.
Yep, that's great to know. So we just have a couple minutes, which is great. And I would just say, if there's any questions that you have, please continue to ask them. It could be that you're all questioned out, and that's just fine as well. We just want to really encourage you to look at the materials. They're just stellar materials. And we've assembled them. And we just, it's like anything else. They're as good as the audience has an interest in and takes the time to just take a look at them and benefit from them. So please do that. And I would just reinforce this comment that Leslie made, which is, if you need to consult about this, reach out to us, and we're happy to draw upon our experience and our network and connections to be of help as best we can. So I think, is there anything more in chat, Marisa, that you're aware of?
Not at the moment. I did
Okay.
chat out a link to the program again, and just as a reminder,
Yes,
this is what you will need to get into the final session.
final session.
And
Right.
I made a copy of it in case there's high traffic. Sometimes it's hard if a lot of people are trying to get into a Google Doc at the same time. So this is the same information. Please feel free to use this link to get to the next session. And thank
This
you
is
so
great.
much.
Yes, and I would just reinforce that, and Leslie will as well. I just want to make sure that you all know we're grateful that you're here and you're talking about this with us. And it's our belief that it really takes a number of voices to be heard, right? We all can sing a little bit of a tune and it largely goes unheard. But when we're all sort of harmonizing about it, it becomes easier to hear and more discernible as to what it is, the message is that we're trying to convey. So I want to thank you for coming. And Leslie, anything that you'd like to end with?
Thank you for attending. We appreciate your interest today, and keep the good conversation going throughout your own areas. So best wishes to everyone.
Great. And we'll see you in the next session. Take care.